I'd like to welcome everybody to the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. The Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center does these online programs fairly regularly, at least 3 times a week, and sometimes like this week more. We are very grateful to have Olaf Ribeiro with us today. We're going to, in the spirit of the Earth Month, look at trees, historic and champion trees on Bainbridge Island. I do want to make sure I mention that we are grateful for sponsorship for these programs to Fieldstone Memory Care of Bainbridge Island. They offer innovative and compassionate care in their accepting residence at Rolling Bay, which is where they have their apartments. They also offer day stay and respite programs. To learn more or schedule a tour, call 360-689-4314. And Olaf has, as many of you know, wonderful and glorious career of saving many trees. Our canopy is grateful for Olaf's life and work. He's worked not only here on Bainbridge Island, but across the whole world. And so we are grateful and very happy to be able to celebrate Arbor Day and Earth Month by looking at some of the great and interesting trees of Bainbridge Island. So with that, Dr. Ribeiro, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's really glad to be able to get in touch with the community again. You know, when I first came to the island in 1980, I was astonished at some of the beautiful trees I saw, and I thought they would be well taken care of, but I soon realized that wasn't going to happen. I remember there was a tree, some of you may remember, there was a beautiful maple tree by the high school. And I happened to mention that in the paper, that I saw this beautiful tree, and then it was gone the next day, and it turned out someone had gone and chainsawed it down because he wanted his name in the paper as the guy who took down the biggest maple tree on the island. So after that, I had to be cautious how I approached caring for trees. But on Bainbridge, I managed to document a lot of interesting trees. And like some of you know, I put it in my book on historic and champion trees of Bainbridge Island. And so with that introduction, let's look at the slides and see some of the trees I managed to save. And I don't have all of them, but we'll start with just what I have here, and then we can talk about some others. This is the champion cedar tree, one of those on Bainbridge Island, down by the ferry terminal. Then the next one, this one is the Eagle Day dock, where this champion cedar tree resides, under which the Japanese that were being shipped off the island sheltered before being put on the ships to take them over to Seattle, or ferries, I should say. And one day when I was looking at this tree, I realized that it had been eroded quite a bit, and the roots were pretty well exposed. And there was imminent danger of it falling over. I tried to get the city to help me, but they were not interested. So together with Dave Ulan, which some of you may know, is passed now, but he and a group of Japanese Americans on the island, I think there were 20 of us all together. We got a barge to bring in a bunch of rocks to fill in the area around the roots, and Dave Ulan kept putting the layers of burlap in between the rocks to show the whole thing up. And it was quite successful, and I think the next few pictures will show you our work on trying to get these trees done. Let's see, can I click to the next one? yeah, this is the tree. It's quite a majestic tree. It has 7 trunks and quite a spread, canopy spread. Okay, how do I go to the next one? Okay, here it is. You can see the trunk. It's quite majestic. So you can see why they're sheltered under this tree. And then let's see then. Okay. Yeah, here it is, still another area. Then this can be seen from road. And these are the people who helped me. You can see the barge at the back, and here we've filled bags with 100 pounds of rock each bag. And here you see them all filling them. And as we go along, you'll see. The mistake was we tried to to wheel these over in wheelbarrows over to the tree, and the weight of the bags, and we soon found our wheelbarrows were sinking in the sand. So we pretty well had to carry the bags over to the tree. And we had to rush this job because we had to beat the tide. We started at 5 in the morning at low tide, and we hoped to finish before the tide caught up with us. So it was quite an interesting endeavor. Okay, next slide. As you can see, there's the barge that brought the rocks over. Okay, next slide. There we are, filling the base of the tree. Few people know about this endeavor. It was quite an endeavor, and to have so many volunteers was really heartwarming. Okay, next one. There you go. These are just different pictures. There you can see how much that eroded, and we could go right under the tree. Okay. There you can see, you might recognize the 2 people here sitting on the burlap. Okay. And then the next one we can talk about is the trees at, oh, which one is this? I'm not quite sure. I think this is the one at the Historic Center. Yes, this is at the Bainbridge Museum. This is one of the trees that we saved at the center. Let me see, the next one might give a better picture of the tree. Oh no, this, okay, let's go. This, oh no, this is Decus. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is interesting because these are trees on along the waterfront. What's the road there? But all along the waterfront, these are the
Crystal Springs, maybe.
Crystal Springs. And here are these ancient trees along Crystal Springs. So they were there when the first settlers came to this area. And these are some of the trees still existing. It's fortunate that the people who live in this area saved the trees and kept them as they are, so we can still get an idea, and they're well over 200 to 300 years old, so they're quite a sight. Okay, next one. There you go, see how big these trees are. Okay. Here you see another one. This one is on Broome Road. Those may know, some of you may know. And these are the oldest maple trees on the island. I thought they were around 300 years old, but I had the chairman of the Ancient Tree Forum. I invited him to come over from Britain. And I said, I have just a few trees that I'd like you to look at. When he looked at this, he was absolutely excited. He said, these are the oldest maples he had ever seen. And he put them at around 500 to 700 years old. And they're sitting there. And I tried to contact the owners of this property, but he lives in Japan, and I couldn't get because I was trying to make sure that whoever bought this property would save these trees because they're quite historic. And this one in particular, if you look at the base of this one here, there's a little plaque, and it says, in 1861, the daughters of the American Revolution had their first picnic on the island. So at least we know they dated back, and the trees were big enough for them to have a picnic under this tree. It was quite interesting. Okay, next one. See, on this site in 1861 was held an Independence Day celebration. So when I found this plaque and the tree at that time was quite a magnificent tree. And I went there one day to show some visitors this tree, and I found the city crew cutting it down. And I said, why are you cutting it down? And they said, because it's an ancient tree and it's not worth saving. So I stopped them. So all we have left is just the top part that I saved. But it was unfortunate that they cut the whole top off before I could get there. Okay, next one. Here it is. There's still, all these trees are between 500 and 700 years old. Okay, next one. Here you can see how magnificent these maples are. Okay, next one. Sitka spruce. I don't know how many of you have seen this one. This is the largest Sitka spruce on the island. It's on Wadwell Road. You have to go into the park there, and we came across this, and I was amazed to see how big it was. And then they found it was really one of the biggest trees actually in the whole Northwest, and it's just sitting there in the woods, and it's a magnificent tree. For those of you who can walk into the woods and find it, it's just the most, you don't have to find it, you just run into it. Okay, next one. And then there's this tree. This is Monterey cypress. This is on Crystal Springs, not Crystal Springs Road, Pleasant Beach. And I came across this tree, and it had there's a bench cut. The tree was cut because it's so big that they could sit a bench and watch the view of the water from the top of this tree. Magnificent view of this water from this tree. I was amazed that it was still there and standing. So I managed to contact the owners, and they had the records going back to a previous owner of around somewhere in the 1800s. And when he found this, he carefully nurtured it and took care of it. And he had notes of all the things he had done to this tree. So that was really exciting to me. Okay, next one. There it is, another view of the tree. Okay, next one. Yeah, this is the same tree, but you can, this is Douglas Fir Woodbank Drive. Oh, this is the largest and oldest Doug fir on the island. Originally, it was over 200 feet tall, and then they took the top off because they were worried of the wind sail knocking the tree over. So they took off the top 50 feet of this tree or more, but it still stands there. It's a magnificent tree. And as you can see, it's, and the owners are really happy, anyone who wants to come see the tree, and they also have a complete record of the tree. And they have nurtured this tree really well. They spend a lot of money each year calling me and having me treat the tree to make sure it's in good health and stays in good standing. And it's a beautiful tree. When you see it, it's really worth the trip. Next one. This one is a Madrona on Hanson Road, and this is quite close to the road, so you would have no problem seeing it as you drive along. Okay, next one. And this is the champion cork oak on Ferncliff. Some of you may not see it because it's on private property, but it's another beautiful tree to go look at. I think it's the only cork oak I found on the island. Next one. Oh, okay, historic. Okay, port maple. Okay, so here, this is the tree we decided to save. And if some of you know the history of this Oshio Beni, it's a very rare Japanese maple, and it was right there on High School, on Winslow Way, where they have that new building right at the corner of Winslow and Erickson. And they were going to take it out, and they just wanted to cut it down because it was in the way of the new building. And if you know, a number of people got together and called me and said, we got to save this beautiful maple. And I said, yeah, we have to find a place to put it, and I have to dig it up and take it over there. So they gave us permission to dig it up and take it if we wanted it. And so with Charles Schmidt, myself, and a few, and Bob Connolly, who spearheaded this whole thing, because he absolutely loved this tree. So I got permission from BPA to put it in front of BPA if we wanted to. So I got a crew from Ohio that can air spade and expose all the roots, so without damaging any of the roots. So we air spaded, lifted it up, and carried it over to BPA and planted it. And some of you may see it in front of BPA. It changes its leaf color 4 times a year, and each time it's a beautiful shade. It starts green, it goes to yellow, and then to orange, then to deep red, and then purple. It's a magnificent tree. It's right there. So if you go to the farmer's market, you'll be able to see it, and there's a bench by it that was donated in my honor, so you can go sit on my bench. And it's quite a tree. Look at it, it's just magnificent. And we had to, it took over the whole of Erickson Avenue when we were moving. And we thought we were going to be in big trouble. So I don't know if you know Debbie Wenzel. She came there and parked her car across the way and parked it across the road there and lifted the bonnet like the car had a problem and gave us enough time to move down the road and get it to the spot where we planted it. Okay, and the interesting thing is we planted this tree and in late August, the temperature was in the high 80s. And I called Cornell University and said, is it possible to transplant a tree at that time? And they said, no way. There's no way you can transplant a tree in that kind of heat. But if you look at it today, it's in perfect condition because I developed a mixture of sea kelp and humic acids and things and treated the tree, and it's magnificent today. Okay, next one. So this is probably the first current drive. Okay, let's go to the next one because this one will be difficult to see. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's go. This is just some of the trees in the forest. I think we've got all the, let's go on to the next one. Yeah, let's go on to the next one. Okay, next one. Oh, okay. I thought we had, I think that's about it for those trees. So let's stop there and give people a chance to talk about trees or whatever they want to say, and we can go from there. Otherwise, you can get my book and see all the rest of the trees that are unique on Bainbridge. I've had quite an adventure. As some of you know, the trees at the corner of oh God, I lost track of this street name, but all those trees along by where the big Weeping Willow is, that street. Those trees are all historic trees, and the city was going to cut them all down to widen the road. So I went before the city and they said, no, they can't help it. So I managed to get enough money to sue the city to stop taking down the tree. And it was quite an adventure. It took a week before the city, but we did. We saved all those trees and it's magnificent. At least they're standing.
So Olaf, I thought that we might also at this point share some pictures from Joel Sackett,
Sure.
who is preparing, he's preparing a project on trees. He's talked to you a lot.
Yeah.
And he's getting ready to share them, not maybe these pictures, but a related pictures with the museum, the Bainbridge Island Historical Museum. So Joel, I'll just share these and then you might make some comments.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay.
So let
So
me,
why don't you put the first image on?
that would be the goal. Here we go.
Yeah. There it is. I think Olaf was just referring to one of these,
Yes.
right? And I learned in your book that this is called a Whomping Willow.
Yes.
It is, right?
Yes.
And so basically I want to say that I started this project after the museum asked me if I'd be interested in working with Olaf and photographing some of the trees in his book. And I started to do that. But then as I was doing that, I became attracted to other trees that I didn't know anything about them. They just were physically attractive to me. So my appreciation for trees started with Olaf's book, but now it's sort of expanding in all different directions. Let's have the next one. So some of these trees were directly from Olaf's book and his suggestions. This is the
Cedar.
yeah, the witness tree. Is that what it's called, Olaf?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, and you saw some other pictures before of Olaf's trees, of this by Olaf without the dock, or before that, right?
Yes.
And I think on the other side of this cluster of trunks, you'll see one of them was cut down in order to make way for that new dock. Okay. This is another tree that Olaf suggested and is at the Historical Museum.
Yes, the sycamore, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, again, the way I'm approaching this, because I'm basically a social photographer, is to always try to include some human element in the photograph.
That's great.
Yeah, and here's the other tree that's on that property. Again, I don't even know the species yet of these trees.
This is the red oak, the biggest red oak.
That's the red oak.
Yeah.
And what interests me also in terms of the social landscape is that there's this woman with all of her life's possessions in the corner.
Amazing.
she actually lives there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So in a sense, she's not homeless, but she is. And she lives at the property of the museum right now. And to me, that she won't always be there. The tree will probably, be there forever, I hope. But that dates the photograph for me too. Okay, the next one, Reed. Again, probably not a heritage tree by a long shot, but I just like the way this tree sort of complements the house. I think it's about 75 years old. I'm not sure. Okay, and that is the Byerly Tree.
Yes.
The
oh, that's a great one. You had to go to the neighbors to get this.
well, exactly. I had to go to the neighbor's deck.
Oh, okay.
To get that one, and that's Tom Byerly kind of pointing up at it.
You see the difference in height. That's a really great picture.
It's a hard photograph to figure out. So
yeah.
Years ago, they called me when they were trimming this tree.
Mhm,
They were topping it,
mhm,
and I had to go to the other side of the water and photograph of the tree being cut.
mhm,
Next one. Yeah, again, it's not the ideal situation to photograph a tree because there's so much construction going on, but
mhm,
that's what it is right now at this moment. It's the refurbishing or remodeling of the BPA,
mhm.
and that's the tree. What kind of tree is that, Olaf?
That's a maple.
That's a maple.
Mhm, mhm. That's beautiful. Yeah. It's a silver maple. It's a rare maple. It's one of, I think it's the only one I found on the island, silver
Is
maple.
it? Okay, next one, Reed. Okay, this is a plum tree,
Mm,
and I photographed it 2 or 3 times. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, thinking that it would be in bloom. There were some blooms, but it was not blooming this year as well as it has in the past.
mm,
But actually, I like this first shot I took because you can really see the limbs and the structure of the tree
mm.
before it fills in.
Beautiful. Yeah.
The owner of this tree, the owners refer to this as the Empress, their own name for it,
Mm, beautiful.
right? And we talked a lot, Olaf talked a lot about the maples.
Yeah.
This is a grouping of them off of Broome Street.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, next one. Yeah, here's some details from that area. I like the way this tree is split
Mhm.
and just keeps going.
Mhm.
Same area, same yard. Next one, Reed. Same area.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is Crystal Springs Road. I took a walk there recently
Mm,
with the other Reed from the museum,
mhm.
and he pointed out some trees to me. Again, I don't know if this one is well known, but just it appealed to me aesthetically. So,
Madrona.
but there were quite a few Madronas
Yeah.
growing on this road. I think they're pretty old.
Yep. It's just fortunate. It's one of the few places you can get a good idea of madrones. There's quite a few.
Yeah, it's a beautiful color.
Yeah.
All right, next one, Reed. Yeah, also Crystal Springs Road.
This is the one that's.
Yeah, you had a picture of that enormous tree.
Yep, it's well over 200 years old. Yeah.
How old is that?
Well over 200, about 250,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I'll have to check the diameter to tell you
Okay.
for sure.
Next one.
Mm,
Right. I'm not sure. Again, I don't know the name of this tree. It's in the Mauritania Reserve or Preserve.
mhm.
And I just like the way it kind of grew out of the ground at that angle. And also in the foreground, you can see that probably some kids are using it as a little campsite,
Mm,
right?
yep. Mhm. Beautiful.
Next one.
Oh,
Here's the cherry tree that was moved from the high school
mhm.
to Sackett.
Yeah. Mhm. That's beautiful.
Now, yeah, okay, here's the one that remains at the high school.
Mm,
So the previous photograph and this one were pairs and lived together.
mm,
And this whole kind of, what the environment of the trees, the connections they have with each other is becoming really interesting to me.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, this was quite an episode to save those trees from when they were building the school, because the principal said there's no way to save them. And then I got enough donations to manage to get a crew to move the trees over to Sakai. That was really worthwhile.
In the previous image, Reed,
Mhm,
you can't see it because it's on the other side of the blossoms,
mhm.
but a part of the tree, maybe about 20, 30% of it doesn't seem to be alive.
No, yeah, it's sad.
So Olaf, will that come back, or is that just?
I just email them, telling them what they need to do.
Okay, that's good.
The problem is there's just too much water in the root zone, and it's rotting those roots. So hopefully they agree to put in the drainage as suggested and see what happens.
No, it's good. It's possible. That's good.
So it's drowning.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we moved it, it was well worth it, because some of you may know Kelly McCall. She had tears in her eyes because she said she was just a young girl when her father and his friends and his high school buddies planted those trees at the high school. So she said it brought back so many memories to her.
It's a good story.
That was well worthwhile. She was just crying, and she said, "This is one of the best days of her life." I said, "Great, never even realized what we were doing." Yeah, it's worthwhile. It was a worthwhile project.
Okay, read next one. Oh yeah, we're getting to the end. This is not, I think this is a Madrona tree. It's just a tree that I pass, and a lot of us pass on the beginning of the walk in Fort Ward.
Oh, okay.
And it just reminds me of the Apsara, the figure of the Apsara in Angkor Wat, Cambodia, which is mostly carved into stone.
Yeah.
But also there's a lot of Madrona trees there too. So it just reminds me of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have photographed it a few times.
Fantastic.
Yeah, the Apsara, as you might know, is in the architecture of I forgot. Michiko, do you remember? No. Yeah, it's Cambodian architecture, and it idealized. It's supposed to be the idealized woman that you find in the stone carvings. Okay, next one. I think it's the last one. Oh yeah, this is just where I've been hanging out lately. A group of trees that is the rookery for the great blue heron right in Winslow. There's actually more nests this year than there are blue herons. I think some of those nests are not active, but right now they're still building the nests, and soon babies will be born, and then eagles will come and try to snatch them, and it's quite something. So anyway, that's what I've got today. I just wanted to add to Olaf's presentation and thank Olaf for allowing me to piggyback onto your good work.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, good. Okay.
One I missed out that was Joe Kleisman's magnificent cedar tree. That is well worth seeing. That's another tree that's over 200 years old. And it's magnificent. It's well worth the trip to go look at it.
I definitely will. Okay. Okay, well, that's what I've got. Again, thank you, everybody, and thanks, Olaf.
Yeah.
Reed.
Yeah,
Yes, if I would like to open it up if somebody has a comment or a question to Olaf or Joel, just either open up your microphone or type what your question is in the chat. I'm curious, Olaf, if you feel as though the work that you've done here for many years has shifted or at least given people hope. One of the things you kept saying in your presentation was that someone might be a construction person, might be a principal, might be somebody in the city saying, oh, there's no way to save these trees or they won't be able to make the transition. And repeatedly you've shown that that's that's not exactly the case.
No, the only stumbling block to move any tree is the funds, because I don't believe the size of a tree is a stumbling block. I moved one in Seattle that was so big that everyone said it couldn't be moved. And when we brought in the crane, the crane was too small to move it. So we had to get an industrial size crane, and then couldn't get it to the gate. So we had to dismantle the fence and everything. But it was well worth it because we saved the tree. And thank goodness we had the funds for it. And it's magnificent. So then I realized that with my treatments and someone willing to give us the funds, any tree can be saved. And I found out there are, especially on Bainbridge, it's amazing how many tree lovers we have. So that really helps.
Tom and Helen, you have your microphone open. Is that because you have a question or comment?
Yes,
Yes.
we were unable to get in here at 11:30. We're getting the tail end. We wondered if it was mentioned about the Kew Garden trees from England.
Yes,
At the
by the
Eagle
museum,
Harbor
at the museum, yeah.
And the historic,
Yes,
at the Historic Museum in Eagle Harbor.
yes, yes.
they're wonderful.
Yes, and that one also to save. I don't know if you know the history. The city had it as a parking lot to park their trucks and equipment under those trees. So when I came to the island, I was appalled at the way they were treating these trees. So finally, it took a while before City Council agreed to let me save the trees. So I got a crew to break up the pavement with hand tools so we didn't damage the roots. It took us 2 weeks to break up the pavement and put in good new mulch. So that was worth it because those trees are have quite a history. So it was worth saving them. Yep. So they're doing well. And we treat them every year or so with treatments, keep them going. And I was there to get this arborist to work pro bono to prune the trees and keep them healthy.
So Christian Perkins notes that you can go to sustainablebainbridge.org/programs/Bainbridge-island-tree-tour, and you can get a self-guided tour of the trees that are in Olaf's book.
Thanks. It's a bit of a work in progress, but Deb Rudnick and I have already put some metal stakes with QR codes. If you walk about town, in fact, Joel, some of the trees you mentioned by both the theater and also by the historical museum, we had some there. Some of the ones from construction are going to need to get replaced, no surprise, but we've been using Olaf's book as kind of a guide, and there's a map online on our Sustainable Bainbridge website too. So if you can't quite get that whole web link, if you go to just sustainablebainbridge.org and look through our programs, you'll see it listed. And hopefully we're hoping to add more and join with the parks in the future. But as I said, it's a bit of a work in progress, but fortunately there are plenty of beautiful trees to feature. Great.
And it looks like because of the work of people like Joel, we'll keep recognizing the trees that are in our midst. There's a question from Howard Emery. Olaf, please comment on the tree in front of the captain's house above the entry area to the pub.
Oh yes, that's that tree is oh gosh, what's his name? Gone out of my mind at the moment, but when Meg, what was the last name, called me about the tree because she had nurtured it so well because it was a historic tree and they wanted to prune it back completely and so people could get a view from the captain's house. So she called me in desperation and said, can we save this tree? I said, yes. We saved it, and then the city decided to put a sewer line. It was going to go right by the roots of the tree. In fact, they were going to cut half the roots. So she chained herself to the tree while I decided to figure out a way that they could save the tree, and they did. So that tree has quite a history too, and it's magnificent and well worth the effort because it's one of a kind. And let me see if I can find the name of it. Yeah, that was quite a story because when I got there and found she had handcuffed herself to one of the branches, they had to come up with a solution.
Looks like I see there's a story in the Kitsap Sun, Meg Hageman.
Yes, that's it, Meg Hagman. Yes, that's the one. And it was quite, I couldn't believe that there was someone that loved a tree so much, but it was well worth it because we did save it. Yeah. Let me see.
Yeah, Olaf,
But that was Meg. Meg, she
Yes.
would have done that.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, let's see. There was a question from Joe Klasman.
yeah, hi. Just a comment. I was going to say that the property that I acquired some years ago, the McRedmond homestead, has some really interesting, in addition to the great tree that Olaf is talking about, there are some anomaly things that you probably see elsewhere too. But a fellow who lived on the property from the 30s to the 60s used to cut down saplings and use them for construction. He had a collection of these poles in the big log cabin for storage, and some had gotten leaned against a cedar tree, which proceeded to swallow them. So at the time I moved there, you could see the remains of those logs being sucked up and surrounded by the cedar tree. And I've noticed that in the turnaround, that my car turnaround, there's a grove of about 5 or 6 big cedar trees and one big fir tree. I just measured the fir tree this weekend and it's 13 feet around.
Wow.
And there is a small cedar that has wrapped an arm around the fir tree, trying to get around the sunlight. So it grows up and then it grows sideways and around, holding that tree, and it's beginning to get absorbed into the fir tree. And of course, the cedar trees next are beginning to absorb the other part of it. In another couple hundred years, we'll have one big tree there, part fir and part cedar.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John Chen is asking if you know anything about the tree that's in front of the post office next to the piano.
Next to the,
Piano, there's like a soundboard from a piano there that people clink on. I don't,
oh.
it's not ringing a bell,
I'm not
so to
sure.
speak. It's not setting a tune.
Is that the maple tree there? Oh,
Yeah.
I think it's the maple. I think I got it in my book. I'm not quite sure.
I think it's a maple, and that is also the tree where the paper birds are hanging on.
Yes, yes, yes. That's the one. Yes.
How do you have an estimate on how old that tree is?
I know it's over 100 years old, but I never got around to figuring out exactly how old it is. I was trying to find out who planted it and never did get to that point. Some were easy to find out because the people are still alive. Others have moved off the island. And you know, the thing about trees, very few people kept records because trees were just trees. So, you know, there were only those who really cared about trees that kept records of their trees. So that was the sad part, that I had to really dig into history books and find the pictures of those trees so I get an idea of how old they were. Yeah. So it's quite something. It's like the Madrones, because, you know, the city of Bainbridge was originally Madrona City. It was originally started as Madrona City. And they had madrones all over the place. And now all we are left with is the trees in Waterfront Park out there by the parking lot. And they were dying and people said, oh, they're madrones, they're all going to die. So I had to get a guy with his truck, and we put together a formulation and treated those trees and saved them all. All of them are back to being almost healthy. The city wouldn't give us any more money to treat those trees. It took almost 2 months to get permission to treat them in the first place. And that was because we agreed to use our own funds. And it came to about $1,800 to treat those trees. But the second time around, they absolutely said no. It's a shame because trees like that need to be preserved, especially madrones. We have so few left in the downtown area.
Yeah, and there are a few in private property. Are there any things
Yes.
that private property owners should know about to
Yes,
be kind to their madrones?
Yes, whenever I came across a madrona, I would tell them why they're important because we have so few of them. And most of them were willing to treat the trees and do whatever it took. And that's how I got to find out a lot about where madrones existed, because I had one advantage. They knew I was out there trying to save trees, so they would call me and come across some interesting trees that way. But yeah, it's too bad. I was hoping someone would take over. Now we have Joel doing that for us.
It's a big job, Joel, and you've got a camera to do it with. So
I'm just passing through the forest here, that's all.
No, it's worthwhile. At least you have a record then, because that's the most important thing, is to have the record. You have the photographs, and that then gets people interested.
Well, I'll have a lot more questions for you, Olaf, as the weeks and months go by. So check your email.
Yeah, sure, but people take things for granted, but when they see it, then they get excited, like today's talk, and they see that there are still some magnificent trees on Bainbridge. Then people start going out on walks and paying attention, because that was my main idea when I take people for walks, was just say, look at the trees you're walking through. You may take it for granted, it's a forest. But the more you look, the more you'll see that's really interesting.
Laura, who may have a madrone on her property, is wondering if you can share a recipe for treating the tree to keep it healthy.
Sure. You want it now?
Sure.
Okay. What I use is a mixture of mycorrhizae, sea kelp, and humic acid. And that really helps. It's amazing how sea kelp and humic acid will generate the roots and get them going. And it's worked really well. And for madrones, because of that leaf problem they had, we would spray the leaves with the kind of copper mixed with something. It was a good concoction, and it took care of the disease on the leaves of the madrones and brought them back to health.
And Sheila is asking about any historical trees you remember on the Eagle Harbor Congregational Church property.
Eagle Harbor, yes. Eagle Harbor Congregation, yes. I think I got some of them in my book, but they're all maples, and I was trying to find out who planted them, but never did. But I had pictures of some of the old timers when they were 10, 12 years old, standing by those trees, and they were already so big.
Well, I appreciate you spending the time with us today. This is absolutely a wonderful reminder of all the work that's going on and all the work that you have had a hand in. Terry is asking if there's a global organization that's working that you've worked with for saving old trees.
Yes, in Britain, they have the Ancient Tree Forum, and I worked with them to save the Doomsday Oak in Britain and the chestnut tree there that's 1,800 years old. And then I set up an organization in Kenya, and they've planted quite a few trees, and they got to recognize that they have some beautiful trees to save. And they've planted, 10, 12 years ago, no, must have been more than that. I got them to plant trees along their streets, and now they're beautiful. The trees are really up, and then they got really interested. when they saw how beautiful their streets looked with trees and they could walk in the shade. And we put plaques all along explaining the importance of trees and why we try to save them. So that was a good thing that worked out well. And then of course my health caught up with me before I could go to do the same thing in India, but they're starting to save some of their old trees in India too. So hopefully they will save them.
And does the Arbor Day Foundation support this kind of work?
They do, but they're more interested in planting trees. They don't seem to have any mechanism to save old ancient trees. So that's when I got involved with the people in Britain. And the people in Britain, because they have so many beautiful old oak trees and yew trees that they really got interested when they found out they could be saved. The biggest problem is people think when a tree is old, oh, it's old, that's it, it's reached its lifespan. But you know, there is no lifespan for trees. If they treat it right, they live, you know, forever, well past our generation, the next generation, and forever. I mean, there are trees that are still in England, yew trees that the Celtics and the Druids way back centuries ago would use in their ceremonies and have their ceremonies under those trees. That's amazing. Yeah. So even here in the US, across the nation, there are some cities that really care about their trees. And you'll see, because the first pioneers, when they came, they would gather under that tree in New England, the biggest oak tree around, and have their meetings under the tree. That's really interesting because it gave them so much shade.
And maybe a little inspiration.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. The more you dig into the history of trees, it's interesting. When I looked at trees and in religion, and you see in the Bible, there are 37 quotes about trees in the Bible and the importance of trees. And of course, Adam and Eve would have sat under a tree way back when. and the Druids, a lot of these ancient ceremonies of these ancient people, the Druids and people, especially in Ireland, the ancient monks, they all venerated the tree and they had all their meetings or whatever under trees. It was really interesting. But we haven't got to that stage where, although now the city of Bainbridge has finally, after 20 years of trying, has got a tree ordinance and is able to protect some trees. So that's really great. They put a hefty fine on people who damage historic trees. So that's put a pause on people who just think it's old, let's just cut it down. So, you know, if we do more of that, and I was hoping we could put placards or something by these trees so people walking by would understand.
Well, and I think a little of what Christine, who I wanted to also thank, Christine Perkins with Sustainable Bainbridge, for suggesting that we talk with you today. And that she was talking a little bit about that virtual, using the internet to capture some of those so that we can, as we walk by, get the story or some of the stories of some of what we see. Although the other thing that Joel was saying, which I think is almost as much of value, is just to listen and see with what we get in ways other than our brains about a tree that we walk by.
At one time, several years ago, I'd barcoded several of the trees downtown, so you could just put your cell phone against the tree and it would bring up the tree and the history of the tree. And that worked well for a while till someone removed all the barcodes. You know, that's the way it goes. But if we do something like that, people get really interested because all they have to do is put their cell phone against the barcode and get all the information about the tree. And it kind of makes it a nice walk downtown. Because we got a lot of interesting trees downtown, as you see in my book. That tree walk I used to give, because I was surprised how many interesting trees were downtown, and most people would just walk by and never recognize them. So at least now I've got quite a few people that know about the trees, but each time the new generation shows up, it needs, need to know. So pass the torch to someone else to do that for me.
Thank you again very much for your time, and thank you all who joined us.